Welcome to Rare on Air, the monthly podcast from Eurordis, Rare Diseases Europe. I am your host, Julien Poulain, and once a month, we will be exploring the challenges, experiences, and successes of people who live with a rare condition. Today is the 29th of February, which means that we and people across the world are celebrating Rare Disease Day. Rare Disease Day is the global event dedicated to raising awareness for the 300 million individuals living with rare diseases worldwide. This is an event that promotes equity for the world's rare disease community and aims to bring about improved social opportunities, access to diagnosis and treatments, and healthcare for people living with a rare condition. The campaign is coordinated by Eurordis and engaged with by more than 65 national rare disease alliances from every continent. As we commemorate Rare Disease Day, we talk to three leading rare disease advocates. I speak to Simona Bellagambi from UNIAMO, the Italian Rare Disease Alliance, who shares with us the significant milestones and impressive activities of Italy's engagement with the Rare Disease Day campaign. I then speak to Yann Le Cam, our Chief Executive Officer at Eurordis, who delves into the history of Rare Disease Day, recounting its inaugural launch in 2008 and detailing how the campaign has grown over the years. And finally, I speak to Ada Celebatzo, the founder and chair of Eurordis, Botswana's National Rare Disease Alliance. Ada shares her family's moving story of dealing with rare diseases, as well as her views on the value of a strong and united international rare disease community. Simona, Yann, and Ada, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Julien, for having me.
Thank you for inviting, Julien.
Julien, it's a pleasure for me to be here with you guys.
Thank you for joining. So, Simona, how did you first get involved with rare disease advocacy? What is your personal connection and how did rare diseases first start impacting your family?
I could provide you with a very short answer. My niece, one of my sister's daughter, she was born with tuberous sclerosis, and at that time, it was 26 years ago. So if you count the years as a long advocacy time, and I've been involved because at that time, actually, there was scarce information, and being the eldest in the family, I really felt the responsibility to help to support my sister and my niece in searching for information. And it was by chance, really, that I came across a lady with a daughter with tuberous sclerosis, even before I knew that my niece was affected by tuberous sclerosis. And this is the strength of the network of talking to each other to share information. So I was able, a few weeks after her birth, to go back to that lady and to meet her and to provide my sister a basic information, but the opportunity to meet other people, other families with tuberous sclerosis. So it was since the beginning that I understood how important the network is, how important the work done by patient organization is. And this is how I started my advocacy.
Wow, we hear it again and again, the importance of connection and connecting with other rare disease families affected by either the same condition or other kinds of rare diseases. How has the Italian rare disease community been involved in the Rare Disease Day campaign? Of course, I'm aware that the campaign started in 2008, but how has the Rare Disease Day campaign evolved in Italy?
Okay, I'm so proud to tell you about this because I'm the Eurordis lady in Italy, and I was the one to inform rare disease Italian community about the start of the Rare Disease Day celebration. So at the beginning, obviously, it was thanks to UNIAMO, the Italian Alliance of Rare Diseases, that we started an organization that it was really gathering people together. And we had desks with information leaflet and people singing, providing information to people that were just walking by. And it was really nice, and it really offered us the opportunity to build a strong community. But it was just in Rome, because UNIAMO is based in Rome, even though obviously it's a national alliance. So we had some more examples of gathering or other kind of events in other cities, but the major one was in Rome. Then there was an evolution. And I want to make this story short because it's a long story, obviously, starting since 2008 and reaching 2024, where now being in Rome, we had the magic opportunity to meet the Holy Father. We had the chance to have the Pope's blessing every year for the entire rare disease community in St. Peter's Square, where a group of our community gathered together. But then we started also to evolve and we joined the Global Chain of Light campaign. So we had, just to mention, the two key monuments, worldwide known monuments, so the Colosseum and the Leaning Tower in Pisa were light up for the Rare Disease Day celebration. But then UNIAMO really, in my opinion, made a step forward to reach the visibility outside our rare disease community, which is one of our aim, actually, to make rare diseases visible outside our community. So the launch of the campaign Out of Home with electric buses or underground or metro branded with the Rare Disease Day logo and colors and with the UNIAMO logo, as well as the bus stop in several cities of Italy, really allowed us to reach out for the general public, just common people walking by or waiting for a bus and having the opportunity to read about rare diseases. This is, I think, one of the best idea or one of the ways to evolve the movement in order to make it bigger, but even more visible. And this year we will have the minting of a €5 collector's coin. On the one side, the UNIAMO's logo, and on the other side is the Rare Disease Day logo. This is to mark the 25th anniversary of UNIAMO and to remind everyone the Rare Disease Day and how we are building a stronger community.
That's really impressive, especially the ways in which you've actually reached out beyond the rare disease community and beyond those who may be familiar with rare diseases to secure their involvement, because that really is important for spreading the word. And of course, European level action does help, of course, the Italian rare disease community. So I'd like to start bringing Yann into the conversation. But before I ask you, Yann, about the progress that's been made in Europe thus far and the progress that must further be made, I would first like to ask you about your personal story. How did you first become involved in rare diseases?
I really got involved in rare disease for two reasons. One was professional. When in the United States, I was working there and I was working with a consultant in Washington who happened to have worked on the adoption of the orphan drug regulation in the US. So that was my first really contact with the notion of rare disorders. And then later in 1990, my first daughter was born and immediately diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. So I couldn't say I entered into rare disease that way, but I entered into one disease, which was the disease of my daughter, before I understood the disease of cystic fibrosis more broadly. And as part of that, I contacted the AFM Teleton because I knew them well. And discussing with them, I entered into that world of the neuromuscular diseases. And AFM had already contact with more patient groups in rare disease because they were inviting them every year before the Teleton to explain what they are doing. And also they had created an information, or they were planning to create at that time, a line of information on genetic disease, things like that. So that's how I came really to rare disease and to see that there was an isolation of each of these disease, of these patient groups. They were only focused on their own disease and not looking across the commonalities and the common challenges they had. So I had that perception pretty early from 91, 93. And I could compare to the US with the existence of NORD. I realized also that in the UK, there was Contact the Family and there was CLIMB created by Leslie Green. There was also in Denmark, the beginning of the Alliance of Rare Disorders created by Terkel Anderson and other colleagues. So there was something emerging there. That's why I came really to rare disease. But, perspective, as opposed to the US, I think we came to it not from the perspective of the medicines, but really from the perspective of the people, of the needs of the people. But the first and foremost thing that comes in is that there is nothing that can happen if there is no awareness, really. But for the policymaker, but also for the people at large, for the population at large, right?
Absolutely, Yann. It's interesting that in those initial days of your rare disease advocacy, you spotted these opportunities for cross-disease and cross-border cooperation, given that there were clearly things that could be done that would help the whole rare disease community. Of course, you nicely mentioned at the end there the importance of awareness raising, the key purpose of Rare Disease Day, which leads me to two questions. Firstly, can you tell us the story of when Rare Disease Day was first conceived and launched? And also, what would you say about the progress that Europe has seen in rare diseases over the years, whether that is since the launch of Eurordis in 1997 or since the launch of Rare Disease Day in 2008?
Maybe one thing is that the idea of having an awareness campaign in the form of a day, in the form of a week, in the form of a month is something that we have discussed between us from the foundation of Eurordis. The first people who came together to create Eurordis in 96, 97, the idea was already there, but we didn't have the concept and what. And it was recurrent in our discussions, particularly in our network of national alliances within the Council of National Alliances. And it emerged at a moment really from the colleagues from Sweden. That's the story, is that it's Sweden who said, what if we were doing it on the 29th of February? Because that's an exceptional day. That's a day that nobody will preempt, and that's us to be different. So the Swedish initially thought we should do a campaign every 4 years only, and that's how it started. When I heard that, I said, yes, that's the idea. That's the thing we're looking for since 10 years. That's the thing. This last day of February is the thing. And then that's how, after that, we all worked together. It was really a co-construction, a co-shaping with the national alliances in Europe to create the first Rare Disease Day on the last day of February. And the Swedish, for the story, initially continued to do it only every 4 years. Now they do it every year. So, but all that is nice. It's part of the story. In terms of the impact, I think to understand the impact, we need to step back. 2 decades ago, the notion of rare diseases didn't exist. Didn't exist. So you were talking about your own disease. I have tuberous sclerosis. I have cystic fibrosis. I have a Duchenne myopathy. You have only your disease. Now, when you speak about the patient groups, each patient group was working only on its own disease and its province or its country.
Right.
There were only few diseases that were already connected at the European level, like hemophilia, to give one example, but they were or in the field of some rare cancers like leukemia, but there were really only a few. So that notion didn't exist. Second, in many regions of Europe, when you had someone affected by a rare disease, which could be visible, you will be ashamed.
Right.
And you keep the person at home and you hide the person even from the neighbors. I can tell you, I saw it when I started with you. I saw it. I saw it in the south of Italy. I saw it in Malta. I saw it in even sometime in France in different ways, is that it's not discussed. There was also the discussion that when you have a genetic disease, then there was a full debate in the family, or it comes from your part, or that comes from the grandfather, it's your family, it's not my family. And today that has disappeared, right? You don't have that, or very rarely, let's say.
Yeah.
So we moved from a situation 20 years ago, which was a lot of ignorance, a lack of awareness that this is a disease, that it can happen to everyone, that there is action that can be taken. And there was a lot of isolation, individual, family isolation, but also the collective work at the level of the patient groups was in isolation. And what we've brought with Eurordis, but even more with Rare Disease Day, is to break that isolation and to go from isolation to inclusion, to collective work and to inclusion, to go from ignorance to knowledge. And the ignorance and the isolation, again, at the family level or at the collective level in patient groups, as an immediate consequence, is that there is indifference by society, but also by the policymakers, which are only the mirror of society. And this indifference to the situation of the people affected by a rare disease then creates a violence. It's a societal violence because they are ignored.
Yeah.
You don't know how many there are in the country. You don't know for which disease. You don't know with which consequences. And the first thing you can do to help anyone with a rare disease is to raise awareness. so that there is a recognition that we do have these people in the country with a problem and we need to take action.
Yann, I'm aware that at the point at which this podcast is released, you will have actually attended an event in the European Parliament marking Rare Disease Day. Of course, I know there are many things you would relay to them, but what are some of the key things you'll be asking them to implement or do to make sure there is progress for the whole of Europe's rare disease community?
It's very clear. At this moment of European election in Europe, as we will have the election of a new European Parliament, and then after that, the appointment of a new commission with different commissioners. So it's a moment of definition of a new political agenda for the next 5 years. Our message is very clear, is rare diseases should be a higher priority than it has been in the previous period for the next 5 years. Now is the time to have a European action plan for rare diseases. We did it, and that's wonderful, for cancer with the Europe Beating Cancer Plan, but we need a larger plan for all rare diseases, including, again, maybe the rare cancers, but all rare diseases, genetic, non-genetic, for the next 10, 15 years. We see a strong dynamic today in the member states. We have 23 member states who have an active action plan or have recently adopted an action plan on rare disease. We have 11 which are developing one or planning to adopt one soon. So there is a strong dynamic coming bottom up from the member states. It's a no-brainer that for rare disease, because precisely of the nature of the rarity of the patients, of the expertise, of the knowledge, of the solutions, of the money, European collaboration is the right level of action to go faster and to be much more efficient and cost efficient for society in addressing in an equitable way the needs of the people affected by rare disease in Europe.
No, absolutely. Something comprehensive is absolutely needed. And you're right to highlight the European parliamentary elections. In just a second, I will be continuing our conversation about Rare Disease Day, but I would just like to remind you that tickets are now available for ECRD 2024, the 12th European Conference on Rare Diseases and Orphan Products. The conference will be on the 15th and 16th of May 2024, and it is Europe's largest patient-led policy-shaping event in rare diseases. The conference is a must-attend for anyone looking to remain informed and engaged in pioneering solutions to improve the lives of people living with a rare disease. We are expecting to gather more than 1,000 participants, hundreds gathering in Brussels, and many hundreds more gathering online. Don't miss your opportunity to be among them. Get your tickets for ECRD 2024 today at rare-diseases.eu. And it's at this point I would actually like to go beyond Europe and speak to Ada. Ada, of course, you're familiar with the needs of the rare disease community in Botswana, as well as the rare disease communities across other African nations. But Ada, first of all, tell me your personal story with rare diseases. I understand that you have 2 children with 2 separate rare conditions. When did rare diseases first start impacting your life and the life of your family? And how did the challenges change over the years?
Okay, thank you very much, Julien, for those questions. As you've mentioned, I'm a mother of 4 kids in total, and the first 2 of my children have rare diseases. Our firstborn, a son, 15 years now, he has an undiagnosed kidney condition, but the only thing that the doctors have identified so far is that he had hypoplastic kidneys, which means that they were both very small and not growing at a rate that could sustain him. So when he was 6 years old, his kidneys totally failed. And we were fortunate that by 7 years old, he had a kidney transplant. Because I was a match, I was able to give him one of my kidneys. We have a daughter, our only daughter, who is our baby number 2. She has a lysosomal storage disorder that is called MOCHO-A. For us to get to know exactly what is wrong with both of them, it happened almost in the same year. That was in 2012. 2012, around June, July, we got to know that our son's kidneys had something wrong with them. And then towards the end of that year, after pushing doctors to do a whole skeletal survey for my daughter, a radiologist got back to us querying MOCHO-A. And then by the beginning of 2013, then I sent samples to Manchester NHS lab. That is when we got a confirmation for my daughter. So basically for the past 15 years, I've lived my life in the space of rare diseases. And as I'm saying that we got this news at the same time in the same year. And then we progressed with the bewilderment, the anxiety of both kids who were going in and out of hospital interchangeably. That was quite stressful for myself and my family. And we were young parents. We've just had kids, and then we get to have rare babies. So the difficulties continued and were different at different levels. I wouldn't say for you this time was better, this time was worse, because when you get such huge, devastating news, a double portion of them all at the same time, that is traumatic. But then you have to continue, and then at that time you have to move fast, even though you don't know where you are moving, to try and find out exactly what these conditions are all about, what kind of help we could get for our kids, and to read extensively, especially for MOCUA, because information was out there, to see what is available as therapies. And to be even more devastating to know that there was nothing of help in Botswana or even in the continent around that time. And then I remember 2 years after her diagnosis, our daughter, then there was enzyme replacement therapy approved in Europe and in the US, but still we were far off from that because we are based here in Botswana. So progressing through this, it brought different challenges at different times. Even right now, the challenges that we are facing now are not the same challenges that we were getting when we got the diagnosis. So it continues to affect and impact our lives in different ways as we progress.
Yes, I understand. The trauma that your family must have gone through and is still going through is quite devastating. So I would like to ask you, Ada, what does the Rare Disease Day campaign mean to you?
Well, the Rare Disease Day for me, coming from Botswana, is a great opportunity to create awareness, because when I got diagnosis for my kids, I think it took me about 2 years to finally decide that I will go into advocacy.
Right.
Not for myself or my kids, but for the people of Botswana and also for the people of Africa, because I came from a background of policy. I had worked for government for a long time. So I'm well aware of how governments mobilize resources. I'm well aware that there's no government that can work without a policy and meet the needs of their people. So the first thing that I did when I started with my organization, the first conversation that I had with other fellow Africans was that there is no point to be busy saying, I'm doing something in Botswana and you are busy doing something in your own country. We need an alliance that would pull African resources together, because nothing is actually being done in our continent to make sure that people with rare diseases are getting the help that they need. It wasn't a new concept, because I had actually, when I left my job, I was working for the Ministry of Health. So I knew that our countries collectively at the African Union, there are certain points where they pull resources together, even for health issues, to make sure that they tackle them well. So to do that for rare diseases, it wasn't a no-brainer for me. So when I started then, we were established in 2015, and then I got to know about Rare Disease Day. Then to launch Botswana Organization for Rare Diseases in 2017. We launched Botswana Organization for Rare Diseases on Rare Disease Day. And that is how we got to associate ourselves with other voices globally that speak our language, that we could borrow from and make sure that we get the job done from those that have gone the journey before us. So for me, it's more for awareness, because as Yann has said, awareness, you could never underrate it. You could never say it is done, it is finished. And it is always that door that opens everything that we are looking for. So we could say all we want that our policymakers are not doing anything. But through my work, I got to know that you'd find that some of them genuinely are unaware of rare diseases. Some of them genuinely, they are unaware of the hardships that these are bringing to their voters. So I remember at one point I presented for our Parliamentary Health Committee. You know, at the end of my presentation, they were just looking at me as if I was having 10 heads. I remember one of them was saying, Eda, I'm very ashamed. I don't know what you are talking about, but at the same time, I know what you are talking about because I never was aware of this. I always see children like this, but I never knew what this is. So awareness is very, very critical at every level, at all times. So Rare Disease Day for me is that day that we use as bodies to send the message out to everybody. It's not for patients, it's not for policymakers, it's for everybody that we live with. We send the message out so that they get to know about rare diseases and they get to be challenged to do something. It is also a day that we say we are connected with other beings in other parts of the world, which is why when we started, we immediately formed alliances at a global level with other organizations that are dealing with rare diseases. So that is what Rare Disease Day is for us.
That's a really impactful story, especially concerning the policymakers who you did a presentation to. I think the fact that you can get that response from policymakers upon them being made aware also provides lots of room for optimism. And Yann, what would be your advice, perhaps, for someone considering becoming an advocate or considering going out there and campaigning for a better future for people living with a rare disease?
The Rare Disease Day it's a framework, it's an opportunity, it's a moment enabling anyone to take action during the Rare Disease Day. And for a person, either not yet an advocate, but just a family affected, someone who wants to take action, or a small patient groups who is lacking resources, starting by telling your personal story or the story of your different members in your patient groups and of your spelling out your needs and expressing your ideas, your solutions to address those needs and bringing together the people who can help to address those needs. So the social provider, the healthcare providers, the policymakers, that's how you create the change. And even if you do it on a small scale or you think it's a small scale, but that's at the end where you need the change. You need the change for the person. So the small scale is already good. It's around the person. But then there is also when you can take bigger initiatives and work at national or international level. And really my hope is that Rare Disease Day is a moment where all rare disease patients organizations in the world, but also healthcare providers, institutions, policymakers, media who have a reason to take action in rare disease can take action at that moment to raise awareness specifically for a more equitable world for people living with rare disease. And I hope that even the ones who have their own day of information for their disease should take part into the Rare Disease Day in order to speak about the common needs, the commonalities, the common strategy which is needed. The campaign on awareness needs to be much more connected across and much more synaptic and much more organic, I would say, between all of us. Because everything we will do for each of these awareness moments, empowering the other awareness campaign.
Absolutely. As important as Rare Disease Day is, and as much of a noise we want to make, rare disease advocacy is important across many different occasions. Finally, I would like to ask you, Ada, what your advice is for people considering becoming involved in rare disease advocacy. And I would also actually like to ask you, in particular, Ada, many of our listeners are, of course, based in Europe. Are there any ways in which you believe European advocates can show their solidarity for national alliances and communities beyond Europe?
There's already some collaborations that we've done with people that are in Europe. For example, I have been able to host twice training for doctors across the continent on lysosomal storage disorders through partnerships with doctors from Europe, with pharma from Europe. So we have a lot of gaps in the continent of Africa, but where Europe is ahead, there's always that opportunity for us to collaborate and speed things up so that we can get to where we want to go.
Absolutely. That's a really important point for our listeners to take away. It's been great speaking to all three of you. Thank you for sharing your personal stories and all of your great work. Yann, Simona, and Ada, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Julien. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
I was saying thank you for Ada for making the time to join us today. That's really very nice. And thank you, Simona.
Brilliant. Thanks.